Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. With Mercedes arguably squandering their best chance of a victory so far this season, Mercedes have actually apologised to Hamilton for choosing the wrong strategy in this race after Hamilton claims that he suggested the soft tyre was the way to go for starting the race. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. So yesterday's Mexican Grand Prix, honestly a contender for the most boring race of the season, but congratulations Max Verstappen, a new record for victories in a season. Red Bull have now won the last, I don't know how many, 8 or 9 Grand Prix in a row, something like that, and that they're 16 for 20 this season in terms of Grand Prix victories. Ferrari have won 4, and who's going to bet against Verstappen and Red Bull taking 2 more before the end of the season. This then was Pirelli's hopelessly inaccurate possible race strategies. They reckoned the quickest was a 2-stop, soft, medium, medium, then the alternative very close option was a 1-stop, medium, hard, and these are what they discussed. So clearly Mercedes went into the race thinking, you know what, the 1-stop might be on. I reckon they thought it was going to be a Zandvoort-esque race. You guys remember the Netherlands Grand Prix where Mercedes were the only team that could have done a 1-stop there. Turns out with the safety cars and stuff, Verstappen won there anyway with the soft tyres towards the ends, and there was a lot of strategy drama that race as well. But Mercedes was the only car in Zandvoort that could get away with a 1-stop, and I wonder if they were thinking, you know what, medium hard is a possibility here, and I think we can make it work. When we saw that the Red Bull started on the soft, it was like, this is interesting because a 2-stop might be on for them, and obviously Mercedes went for the more flexible option starting on the medium, but it probably proved to be a mistake. But even with the mistake off the line, they did have a chance to make up for it, because lap 26, of course, the start went as it did, with Perez getting Russell, and you can argue that if both Mercedes were on softs, then probably they keep second and third, because Russell lost the place to Perez due to traction out of turn 3, and because of, he couldn't brake as late as Perez could into turn 4, so probably if both Mercedes start on softs, they might even get Verstappen, but if not, then they'll probably still be 2-3, which gives them more strategic options in terms of when they pit for mediums or when they pit for whatever tyre they wanted to pit for, because then they can go for the undercut, the overcut with both respective drivers. You could argue in that instance, being second and fourth meant they were in a bit of a tricky spot, but Verstappen lasted 25 laps on an old set, it was a used set already of soft tyres that I believe was scrubbed from practice. So the fact that he managed that surely should have told Mercedes, these tyres are not degrading anywhere near as quickly as was expected, and the mediums might be able to go to the end. Now, I don't think Mercedes necessarily made a bad call with what they did with Hamilton, because they brought him in on about lap 28 or something, a few laps later. They kind of had to, because if they didn't pit Hamilton then, they were vulnerable to the undercut from Perez, even though Perez had that bad stop. If Mercedes kept Hamilton out too much longer, he was going to get undercut by Perez, so they kind of had to pit him for the hards. There was really no other option there. So it's understandable what Mercedes did for the hards at that point in the race, and we still didn't know at that point whether it was possible that the tyres would just drop off a cliff for Verstappen. The 1-stop still seemed soft medium. That seemed ambitious at the time, seemed a bit of a Hail Mary. Turned out it was easy for the Red Bulls especially, and pretty much the entire grid did it with no problems. And of course, Russell and Hamilton both not happy with the hard tyre they put on. I think the key mistake from my perspective was what they did, arguably at the start with using the medium over the soft, but also what they did with Russell, because Russell was in a no man's land position. Both Ferraris were terrible, their race pace was abysmal, their engine was awful, and they had no downforce or whatever. They were miles behind. So Russell was always going to be fourth at worst, and third potentially at best, you could argue in this situation, maybe even better, because it was lap 35 of they pitted Russell. He was under no threat for an undercut or anything. He was always going to come up behind Perez. I think the mistake from Mercedes was not giving the medium soft a go. If they'd have extended Russell's stint, and he probably could have made it happen, the degradation was nowhere to be found, so they could have extended Russell's stint beyond lap 34, and of course, look, if let's say they get to lap 40 and the tyres are falling off a cliff and it's too early to put on the softs, then whatever, you bolt the hards onto Russell, you say, it's unfortunate we did 40 laps on mediums, 30 on hards, which is basically what Bottas did actually, but whatever, Russell would still have got 4th place, probably would have been in a position to still pit for softs and get the fastest lap at the end anyway. The alternative was that if Russell did go longer, went to lap 40, 45, then they could have pitted for softs and then had an absolute rocket ship Russell at the end of the race. You might have got Perez, might have got Hamilton, who knows? There could have been a double podium on the cards of Mercedes if they took that risk. They didn't. They did the same thing with both drivers. The other option as well was that with Russell staying out that long, there was a chance that maybe he holds up Verstappen, he does what Perez did to Hamilton in Abu Dhabi, and then maybe there's a chance that from a strategic perspective, they can help get the team the victory. They kind of went for saw none of those options, and it didn't work in their favor. So I think the key question really here was, why didn't they start on the soft tire? I think that's probably the key issue because, as I said, they could have gone medium soft, and medium soft did work out for especially Daniel Riccardo towards the end of the race. He did about 45 laps on the mediums, bolted the soft on, and there was a rocket ship at the end of the race, which was really cool to see after he took out Yuki Tsunoda. And there was the option there to do that with the Mercedes as well. As I say, with Hamilton though, you run a bit of a risk because if he went long, he would have definitely got undercut by Perez, and then would he been able to pass Perez on the straights? Unlikely, possibly, with the Red Bull straight line speeds. So I think they made an okay call there, but the issue was not starting on the soft tyre in the first place. And even looking at the race pace differential here, Hamilton was only about 1.5 tenths of a second off Verstappen per lap, and that's with the delta. During the first periods, when Hamilton was on the mediums and Verstappen was on the softs, the race pace differential was 0.03 seconds, I think. So, like, pretty much Mercedes and Red Bull had what is effectively an equal car in Mexico, it seems. The win was on, but it would have taken some strategy because I don't think they were going to pass Verstappen on track. That seemed unlikely, especially after he stayed ahead into turn 1. So I'll just share a couple of thoughts here from Mercedes and also from Hamilton himself, because Andrew Chauvelin admits after the race, we thought about the soft medium one stop. We didn't think it was going to be quite so comfortable though, and if they could run the race again, we'd have started on the soft tyre. Hamilton says the same thing here in his interview after the race, saying that, you know, he thought that maybe the soft tyre would have been the way to go, and when he saw that they were using softs, he thought, yeah, this might be a mistake. Turned out to be the case, and Toto Wolff effectively agrees.
I think so. When I was on the medium tyre, there wasn't really any degradation when they pulled me in. So I think ultimately, yeah, we should have been on the soft. It's something I had asked and questioned. I thought maybe one of the two Mercedes should have a soft to be able to attack. And when both Red Bulls and everyone behind took their tyres off and had softs, I thought, shoot. So yeah, there may be a loss for us today, but still, this is good points.
Yeah, overall, it's another very strong weekend. Lots of positives to take, being back in the hunt for race wins again.
So many positives, and the upgrade really worked in the last race. We still have improvements to make, which we probably won't make in the rest of this year, but we know exactly where we need to improve for next year, so that's good.
We didn't think that the medium would go anywhere until the end. Totally surprising, also the way Perez hammered the tire and that it was still holding on. So we just got it wrong. We discussed whether the soft hard was a viable one-stop strategy, and we thought never gonna go. So soft medium wasn't even on the radar.
So I don't think Mercedes' strategy necessarily was terrible, just because they were hoping. And in fairness, I think that probably, look, Verstappen and Red Bull had the advantage anyway. They do have the quicker car, and obviously Verstappen's driving like just unbelievably well at the moment. It would have been really difficult to beat him anyway. So I can understand the idea that, you know what, let's go medium hard. Let's hope that those mediums fall off. Because in fairness, if Verstappen's mediums fell off with 15 laps to go, then, you know, all of a sudden the question is there, does he pit for fresh softs? Does he try and hold on to the lead with, you know, Hamilton catching on the kind of used up hards? But, you know, there's a question to be raised there, and maybe that was what they thought that they needed, like some sort of luck to fall in their favor with degradation to help out Mercedes. But the tyre deck in general of Red Bull has been incredibly good lately, so that seemed unlikely to be the case anyway. The other option from a strategic perspective was to go for the soft at the start, effectively copy and paste the strategy that the Red Bull were going to do, but go a little bit different, as in, let's say Verstappen got to lap 25, pit Russell on lap 23, pit Hamilton on lap 27, try and do an under overcut type thing and see if one of those guys can get ahead of him as a result, which might have worked, it might not have worked, but that was possibly the other option. And even as Hamilton says, it would be much more enjoyable to try that, and he reckoned at the start, before the race began, that he was kind of mentioning, you know, maybe the soft is the way to go. The team decided differently, and, you know, obviously from a strategy perspective, that's probably where the race was lost. But still, some good positives for Hamilton and Mercedes, of course. The race pace was better here than it's been any time for Mercedes so far this season. If things had gone different in terms of strategy or degradation, or, you know, rain potentially, or the sun and further heat on the track increasing degradation, or let's say, you know, Pirelli had chosen slightly different tyre compounds to be the soft, medium and hard, then there would have been a different story this race. But as it turned out, it was once again Red Bull and Max Verstappen walking away with the victory. This I thought was kind of funny in a way, I don't know, a bit ironic, I thought, for Mattia Binotto and Ferrari, because he's effectively calling out Mercedes, saying, yeah, in Hungary, we were criticised for our strategy. It always happens when we do something wrong, but Mercedes have lost the last few races by picking the wrong tyres. There's been a few occasions Mercedes haven't made the best decisions. It's not just up to us to choose between different tyres with the risk of making mistakes. So funny, really, from Ferrari to come out and say, oh yeah, Mercedes, these guys, their strategies keeps costing them races. I'm like, sir, you have like the second best car, if not the best car, for the start of the season, and at the amount of points that Ferrari squandered, I don't really think they're in a position to be calling out Mercedes. Yes, Mercedes maybe did make a mistake in this particular race, but they're also 8 times consecutive World Constructors Champions since Ferrari has even won one. So, I mean, you know, you've got to give them a little bit of credit, and at the end of the day, for Mercedes, how good they've been over several years. Yes, their strategy at times is questionable, and maybe not so much as Ferrari's, but I thought it was a little bit rich from Ferrari to call out Mercedes for strategic errors, given the fact that, you know, it happens to Ferrari rather more often. But yeah, look, 2 more races for Mercedes and Hamilton to try and get a victory. This, I think, according to Toto Wolff, he said in the simulator, this was going to be their best race so far. And of course, the car stays the same from now to the end of the season. Brazil is, you know, a track that obviously Hamilton's fantastic around. It should be pretty good for the Mercedes, that middle sector. The straight might hurt them massively. Again, if there's any way to beat the Red Bulls around there, it's probably going to have to be in the pit stops as opposed to on the straight. And also the drag advantage that they kind of gained on around Mexico, because the drag is less with the less air resistance due to the higher altitudes, that goes away a bit in Sao Paulo, right? So that's where they might not be so good, but still it would be interesting. And also Hamilton has claimed as well that they know what they've got to do next year. And it's impressive to me that Mercedes have been able to get this close to Red Bull. Like, the cars were practically equal around Mexico this weekend. I did not think I'd be saying that at the start of the season. And Ferrari, like, where were they? They were like 8/10 off the pace a lap in race pace, like for various reasons. So it was impressive that Mercedes got to this point. Whether they can be on par, like, you know, we hoped all season we would get a 6-way fight for the victory, right? We thought there'd be a world in which we had both Mercedes, both Ferraris, both Red Bulls at some point in the season all fighting for race victories. And then now Mercedes are there, Ferrari are nowhere to be found. And it's still just Verstappen winning every race regardless. Hopefully next year can be more competitive on that front, and Mercedes seem to believe they know what they are doing. And these are the numbers as well in terms of points for this season. Crazy actually that Verstappen has, I think, 416 points. Mercedes and Ferrari, like, they only have just over 400 and like almost 50, right? So Verstappen on his own would be like comfortably third in the constructors and almost second, and potentially could even get first, even though that's I'm pretty sure that's impossible now with only 2 races to go. Shout out McLaren as well, and also Daniel Ricciardo, 1.98 second stop, and the second fastest stop as well of the weekend. Thought was pretty crazy. At 1 point under 2 seconds on the new regulations for the pit stops. That is crazy. So congratulations to the McLaren team, and also credit to Daniel Ricciardo. Drove a great race at the end. I thought that, you know, the way he took out Yuki was unfortunate. Yuki probably wasn't getting points anyway. And look, I don't know, there was talks about whether it was fully Ricciardo's fault. It definitely was his fault. Whether he deserved a 10 seconds, people say, okay, Russell got a 5 second, Daniel got a 10 seconds. At the same time, the Russell incident was lap 1, turn 1, which is usually treated a little bit differently to later in the race. Daniel just needed to be a bit more patient, and it got the move done, no problem. But you know, still, he was making some cracking moves towards the end of the race as well. And yeah, Alonso, of course, unfortunately, his engine blew up yet again. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care, and I'll see you next time.